One of the lessons is everybody eventually comes around. We want these things to work, right? No matter how much you hate a move. And then, a lot of people out there are mad about the Brady hire off the bat. And you're like, all right, let's start to see the vision. Let's start to see the staff get put together. Defensive coordinator going to be different because Bobby Babich left. We're going to talk about it with Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast. Joe, good morning. Everybody, eventually comes around because what else are you going to do? Just, be mad all the time? Might as well find a way to see how's this going to work. Let's talk about it going forward,
Yeah, I'm real curious to see, what we get today from Joe Brady about the vision and see the staff come together and, distance ourselves from that immediate reaction that I think was pretty disingenuous to just assume that nothing's changed and that, Joe Brady's the same thing as Sean McDermott. I think the dust needed to settle a little bit, and hopefully that's happening, and we can have a reasonable outlook on what's going to happen here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guilty of that. Like, I thought maybe they really just want to get McDermott out, but it has been the Bobby Babich move, and we'll see. Like, if they just elevate a defensive coordinator from within, they might kind of fall right back to that. So there's still more dust to settle. But how have you liked the names you're hearing for potential defensive coordinator, whether that's Jim Leonhard, Jim Schwartz, who's with the Browns but clearly intends to leave? Raheem Morris is another name I've heard recently as well. What can the Bills do to really change what they do defensively? How different are these names and these ideas?
Well, I'd say any one of those three names are very different philosophically, schematically than what the Bills have been under Sean McDermott. And so I am excited about that piece. I think if Bobby Babich would have just stayed as a defensive coordinator, then you start to really think, oh, man, this is literally just, taking McDermott out of the equation. And it's not going to be the case, right? Bobby Babich is in Green Bay. And so I think whether it's Jim Schwartz or Jim Leonhard or Raheem Morris, they all represent different paths of change defensively, very different ideologies, even within those three. Maybe there's some similarities between Morris and Jim Leonhard, but I would say that Morris has been a pretty different type of guy, kind of his roots in the Tampa 2, and then this past year they were really kind of like an odd front that's more attack-oriented. So, there's been a lot of evolution for Raheem Morris, but regardless of which one of those three, it's going to be a different defense. And, I think there's going to be a lot of change on offense, even though, Brady's continuing as the offensive coordinator. I think there has been some things influenced offensively by Sean McDermott, and, he inherited the staff that Sean McDermott put together. So Brady will put his full stamp on this operation offensively and defensively, and, I'm curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, we're going to get change. We know that, Joe. And, in the next couple weeks, months, we'll talk combine, we'll talk draft, we'll talk free agency. Do you feel like Bills fans might be able to start, completely resetting their expectations in the draft? Like, we might have talked in the past about, you like this certain defensive tackle, and you would kind of take him off the board because the Bills don't take this type of player. Is it? We have to find out, of course, who the defensive coordinator ultimately is and what that vision is. But are you kind of wiping the slate clean on the kinds of players the Bills maybe can get now, and that extends to free agency too?
Yeah, I think we have to reset our belief of what the archetypes are, right? Whether it's linebacker, D-line, O-line, receiver. I think there's a lot of potential for new to come, and so. Yes, I do believe that we need to be careful to not apply that to Joe Brady and his group moving forward. And I think that's going to be something we'll have to do very deliberately throughout the next year. If the Bills lose 2 in a row in weeks 5 and 6, it's not fair to say that it's the same old stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we have to let Joe Brady have his real opportunity here to lead this operation without the baggage or chains of what we've seen under Sean McDermott for 9 years. And so, we got a lot to learn. We got a new head coach to learn, and it's not fair to assume that he's just Sean McDermott reincarnate.
So, Joe, what should the offense change? They can, again, point to points per game, and they put up 30 in a playoff game that they lost. But what should they change? This year, Josh Allen got sacked. He turned the ball over again a little bit more than he did the previous season. The previous season was like the perfect year for them. Should they be trying to go back to that, the perfect no-turnover season, or are there different things you'd like to see this offense add?
Well, you should always aspire to, not turn over the ball very frequently. I think that's always a good goal. But I actually wrote an article for the Herd Mentality Substack yesterday, which people can access through thejoemarino.com. I wrote about things that must change with this team moving forward. And offensively, I really got into optimizing Josh Allen, and where I think there's been this approach of, Josh Allen's a quarterback. He's going to handle a certain he's going to maintain a certain level of offense regardless of who we have around him. So let's build the run game. Let's invest in the defense. And I'm not saying you neglect those things, but I do think you have to be way more deliberate about optimizing Josh Allen's ability to impact football games. And, the burden of having Josh Allen as a quarterback isn't that he can erase the team's deficiency. It's to make the most of what he can do to affect the outcome of football games. And so I want to see this team get back to finding their fastball that Sean McDermott said you don't want to lose. They signed Emmanuel Sanders ahead of that 2021 season to go with Diggs, Beasley, and Davis, and a good young tight end in Dawson Knox. They still signed Emmanuel Sanders. And what did Sean?
Nope, we lose Joe. Hold on, we'll try to get him back here. Pick up Joe and see if he went through a spot there or something. Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast. All right, yep, we got him back pretty much right away. All right, he's back. Sorry, Joe. You were saying fastball, Emmanuel Sanders.
Yes. So you don't want to lose your fastball. I think they did. So let's get the fastball back and make sure that Josh Allen has a cupboard full of receivers that are worth throwing the football to. And then I think kind of going hand in hand with that is I like the run game. I really do. But the Bills should not be the most run-aggressive offense in the NFL. James Cook had a great season in 2025. His EPA per rush was minus .04. What was Allen's EPA per dropback? Plus .1. All right? We got to get back to throwing the ball a little bit more. And I'm not saying you abandon the run, but can you be 10th instead of first in run frequency? And I think a way that you can accomplish that is by involving James Cook more in the passing game. And that's something that I'm really hoping to see. You look at all these backs that had, monster years in terms of scrimmage yards, Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, right? All of those guys were between 27 and 43% of their yards coming through the air, receiving, right? James Cook's at 15%. So I think it comes down to this. Get the right receivers around Josh Allen. Allow him to maximize his impact on football games. Don't be the most run-aggressive offense in the NFL. And don't take touches away from James Cook. Just redistribute them in the form of receiving targets versus handoffs. And so I think that's a big part of where I would take this offense moving forward.
Other big decisions that will come by contracts and extensions and restructures. Dawson Knox openly kind of said he's not sure about his future here. Do you feel like they should want to bring him back, but at a reduced cap number? I mean, extending or restructuring or whatever it might be. Like, is he still important enough to this offense and to what Joe Brady probably wants to do?
Well, if they're going to be, continue to have a lot of 12 personnel and 13 personnel, and you're a little bit unsure about Kincaid and the PCL injury and, what that timeline for recovery is, I think there's a lot of value in keeping Dawson Knox. But I think we can all agree it can't be at the cap figure that he's scheduled to have this year, which I think is like $17 million. So whether or not you release him and sign him to a new deal, if you give him an extension and kind of redistribute some of that money, I think you have to consider that type of stuff. And, Dawson Knox, I listened to him on the Mitch Morse podcast, and, he talked about, look, there's a lot of levels to this. Like there's the market of tight ends and like whatever you want to call Dawson Knox, I think you should at least consider him a very good blocking tight end that has a good receiving skill set. Like that's probably an $8 to $10 million a year player. Like good blocking tight ends that really don't catch the football are getting paid $7-8 million. And so I do think that there's a reasonable commitment that you'd have to make for it to be fair on Dawson Knox. But I think there's a way that you can certainly get that cap hit of $17 million down to a reasonable amount. So I can see it going either way. I think a lot of this is rooted in what is the vision for the offense moving forward, and if it's going to be continue to have a lot of 12 and 13 personnel to it, then I think you would want Dawson Knox. But maybe you can find a cheaper option. It's he's a glue player. He's been important for leadership. I really like Dawson Knox. I'd love to see him continue, but you have to be careful to not overly commit resources to that position.
Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast, joining us as we talk about the Bills' decision to hire Joe Brady and also, of course, the path forward. There are other big decisions on this offensive line, like David Edwards, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, and I don't know if I want to go to the age of Deion Dawkins. I haven't really, Joe. I'll cop. I have not studied like age curves for tackles, but
they're good.
Yeah.
He'll be all right.
Is he Trent Williams? Right, like play till he's 40. Jason Peters, like he should be okay for a little while. So I'm not speeding up the clock on him. But the interior of the line is about to maybe go through a change. And is there any scheme change there, or do you think it's just try and find the best you can, doing it the way you've been doing it?
Well, I think you look at two expiring contracts in Connor McGovern and David Edwards, and you acknowledge that those are going to be expensive players to keep. You know, I would guess both are $15-ish million a season, and what you're paying Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins, and potentially what you're going to pay Osiris Torrance as a drafted player, right? That's different than Edwards and McGovern, who were both free agent acquisitions. I think you would prioritize the guy you drafted, but I think the Bills have to be they have to do a better job about not being afraid to transition. Those guys are both pushing 30. They're going to be expensive. When you have the opportunity to transition, I think you gotta consider it, and I think this might be a good one. I like those players; they're good players, but there's an opportunity cost if you commit those resources to them. And you've had some young players in the pipeline, and Tylen Grable and Cedric Van Pran Granger, maybe Alec Anderson. He's a restricted free agent. Maybe Ryan Vandemark. I think you have to look at these players as potential successors. Look at draft investments. Maybe instead of giving Edwards or McGovern a 3-year deal that's $15 million a season, you find a 1-year mercenary that can come in and get the job done on a modest 1-year deal. And so, the Bills are not brimming with resources, and so I think they'll have to be careful about how they commit it. And I think you got to be careful to not fall too much in love with your own when there's an opportunity to transition, reset, get younger, and maybe even improve.
Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast ahead of today's press conference. Joe, thanks for the time, and I'll give you more time to, get in the draft, Senior Bowl, Combine, prospects. We'll have plenty of time. The needs are, everybody knows them, right? Receiver, edge, linebacker, safety, guard. Is that it?
That's the punch. You nailed it. Yeah, right. You're wired the right way, Jeremy. You got it.
That's the group. I've grown. I've got more than just receiver on the list. I know there's some needs out there.
You always have. That's right. Always been an unfair criticism.
That's right. I think it's fair. I'm a little heavy on the one side. Thanks, Joe.
You are heavy, but I'm here to balance you out, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Joe.
All right, Jeremy. Thanks.
Joe Marino, the Locked On Bills podcast. Find everything he does at thejoemarino.com, from all 22 stuff, breakdowns, and of course we'll be talking to Joe through the draft process. It'll be, I'm ready to fight all of you on they have too many needs when I tell you that they should trade up to like 9th overall. No, there's too many needs. And I'll say, what are you talking about? It's a Super Bowl roster. It's a great roster.